And now I am honored to bring in our very own Chris Hayes, host of Up with Chris Hayes, every Saturday and Sunday morning. It's a great show. Chris, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you for coming in. It's great to be here with you, Gene.
Well, it's great to be with you. Now, we got to start with Newt. And I think we probably may have to start with the moon, but we can...
we can come down to Earth.
We can make a re-entry. But what's the deal? I was in South Carolina. I saw him in South Carolina. This was an angry, fired-up candidate who came from nowhere, won the primary. What happened?
Here's my theory about Newt. There's part of me that thinks that Newt actually doesn't want to be president. There's part of me that thinks that he really likes the attention. He likes running for president, but he doesn't necessarily want to be president. So that's one theory. The other theory, I think, to use a sports metaphor, which can be a little cliche in political analysis, but I do, there are certain athletes who have a certain amount of natural talent, but not much technique, and they rely on that natural talent. But without technique, you tend to have a lot of variability in your performance. You have a very good night when you're hitting a lot of shots, and a bad night when you're missing a lot of shots. If you have a lot of technique, then you tend to have more consistency. And I think that Newt was a perfect example of someone who was sort of relying on his kind of natural, instinctual, emotional affinity for the right-wing emotional core of his audience, as opposed to preparation, technique, strategy about what he wanted to elicit, what he wanted to say in what moment. He was kind of winging it, and I think that came back to bite him last night.
I think you're absolutely right. But what I just can't figure out is his technique, such as it is, works so well in South Carolina.
Right, but I think
fire him up, get him angry.
It was sort of instinctual, and it was momentum-based. I mean, to sort of extend the sports metaphor, but what happens when very talented athletes don't have technique, it's hard to convince them to do the things it would take to acquire it, because they say, look, I've been successful, right? So when you have a high school quarterback with terrible throwing mechanics and say you need to change the way you throw to get to be a good college football player, they say, look, I'm doing fine the way it is. Newt has been winning the debates. Why would he change? Why would he think more strategically about how to attack Romney, about what he had to do? He was relying on this same kind of emotional appeal, and when he got knocked back right from the beginning because Romney was very prepared, he couldn't feed off the momentum that he had gained in the beginning.
Yeah, he's kind of relying on divine providence to provide an opportunity that never came. What about Mitt Romney, though? It wasn't really necessarily the greatest week for him. It was a good week against Gingrich, but I wonder, in terms of the general election, he clearly looks toward.
Look, I think there's 3 points I want to make. One is we've seen the numbers regress to the mean in Florida, right? Which is to say the Newt bubble that was provided by South Carolina victory has seemed to ebb, and now it looks like Romney is pulling ahead. This is a better state for Romney anyway, just in terms of what the electorate looks like and what their sort of affinities are and dispositions. Second of all, I think that Romney, look, the establishment wants Romney to be the nominee, and the rule, both in the literature and political science in this, and just from casual observation, particularly on the Republican side, is that the party establishment gets the nominee it wants. So the question is that rule going to be upset this year? And if it is, it's going to be Newt Gingrich. And I think what we're seeing is actually the fundamental structural incentives in place are going to produce Mitt Romney as the nominee again.
I think I've always thought he would be the nominee. But I wonder increasingly how any nominee really unites this party. I keep, getting emails and reading redstate.com, for example. Really conservative commentators who say, look, I'd rather go down with Newt than have Mitt.
Well, I think we should all remember how fractious things were on the Democratic side in 2008. I mean, the conversations I had with just friends screaming at each other in bars who were both good friends of mine over Hillary and Barack Obama. I mean, that they did end up unifying. And I think what ends up unifying them is that they really hate Barack Obama. that's the unifying feature of that part of that part of the political
the unifying factor last time was, but do we really rather have John McCain and Sarah Palin?
Right.
At this time, yes, they really hate Barack Obama. I see some commentators saying, but if that's what we get, I think we'll probably go down with Romney anyhow. And look at the numbers. I mean, look at the president's numbers, which have improved.
Well, the economy's improving, the president's numbers are improving. I think the biggest liability that Romney has two big liabilities that he comes out of this with. One is the kind of caricature, which I think is largely true. It's not a caricature of Mr. 1%. Everything about, even when he's defending himself, his defense is, I have a blind trust and an investment manager whose name is R. Bradford something.
I have people who do that
handle that. I mean, every single thing he says, and he is embraced it as part of his identity. I am a successful businessman. I am proud of my success. And he seems like Mr. 1% because he is Mr. 1%. And the other thing, which I think we saw in the beginning of the debate last night, is Newt Gingrich is 100% right. right. He has gotten to the right of everyone pretty much in that field on immigration. He has delighted in demagoguing on immigration, and that is going to be hung around his neck in the general election because the simple mathematical fact is that the Republican cannot win in the fall unless they do much better than John McCain did in 2008 with Latino voters.
Exactly, and that doesn't seem to be on the horizon. And actually, if you project forward, presumably there will be some far-sighted Republican leader 4 years from now, 8 years from now, who will recognize this basic fact. But if they don't, we're talking Whigs.
Yes.
They're going the way of the Whigs.
And I mean, one of the things you're seeing is they are recognizing now, and they are desperately trying to throw the car into reverse and back out of the driveway because this is Marco Rubio gave a speech today in which he basically was trying to do all this outreach. He told Dream Act protesters, stay, listen to what I have to say. He gently chided the rhetoric of people in his own party. And they do this time and time again. During the primaries, when they're in Iowa, they're serving up the red meat about the illegals, plural noun illegals. Yeah. And then when they have to run away from it in the general, but they cannot outrun what they said.
I don't know how they can outrun. Remember what happened to Rick Perry? His first problem was when he said, if you don't support something like the Dream Act, you don't have a heart. I think it was a reasonable policy position. I do, but Republicans don't.
And look at John McCain. I mean, John McCain, let's remember, he was the one who co-sponsored comprehensive immigration reform, a bill that he was forced essentially by the politics of the Republican base to disown during the election and say, I wouldn't support it now. The bill with his name, and he got creamed among Latino voters in the fall. So he fell exactly into that trap. If there was someone who could have had some credibility on the issue, it was John McCain, but he pandered as much as they all have.
The whole context for this election has been headwinds against the president. The economy, health care reform, not popular. Are those headwinds abating, or is he just making more progress against them, or one or the other?
I think mostly they're abating. I mean, I think what has happened is that the economic situation, the balance sheets of households across the country are beginning to repair themselves. That's the biggest problem. Yeah. People needed to deleverage. It takes a lot of time. The government, by the way, wasn't that helpful on that score. It was very helpful with the Recovery Act, but not so much for the deleveraging. And so we're starting to see normal kind of economic growth restore. The problem, of course, is that there's a lot of uncertainty, Europe, et cetera. Yeah. But the positive thing for the president is this. The trend matters more than the absolute level.
Yeah, it does.
What is happening in the last 6 months before the election is going to be largely determinative of the outcome. And right now, the trend line is certainly in his favor.
Franklin Roosevelt got reelected with something like 17% unemployment because things were perceived to be getting better.
Well, they were getting, I mean, in FDR's case, they were getting better at a remarkable rate.
Exactly.
They're getting 7% a year.
Exactly. 2.8% ain't 7%, but it ain't chicken feed either. No. So we'll see. Chris Hayes, thanks so much.
Thanks, Chief.
Okay. And we'll be sure to watch tomorrow at 7 a.m. and Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern Time for Up with Chris Hayes.